This video discusses the simulation of the Lotka-Volterra predator-prey models. This is often referred to as the fox and the rabbit. So the idea here is that the population of rabbits is dependent on the actual population of the foxes and vice versa. So we know that foxes use rabbits as a food source, and so when we look at this first derivative here, we have the change in rabbits over time. So R for rabbits, T of course for time. So we have the change of rabbits with respect to time is equal to A times the number of rabbits. All right, so this is the factor here that determines the birth. So this coefficient here gives you the birth rate based on the number of rabbits that you have. And then here we have a negative term. So this negative term is reducing the population. So and the only factor we're considering here for the reduction of the population is due to the interaction between the rabbits and the foxes. So the idea here is that if a fox catches a rabbit, then that's one less rabbit in the population. However, this term B here, which needs to be less than 1, if the term there is B is 1, then that would mean that every time a fox and a rabbit interacted, there would be one less rabbit. But B, as you can see right here, these are some values that I'm going to use for my simulation. So the B means about 60% of the time that a rabbit and a fox meet, the fox wins. Okay. So the population of the foxes then is determined by this second derivative here. So the population of the foxes is going to increase with food supply. So as they get more rabbits, they will be able to capture more rabbits. So this term B times R is going to increase. But then there's the factor of G, which has to do with the birth rate of the foxes. All right, so just because the fox had a good meal doesn't mean that they're going to have offspring. And then here we have basically the mortality factor. This dash H is the mortality factor of the foxes. All right, and so as you know, it's just old age or injury or sickness, or because there's no other interacting factors in here. So we also don't actually have like a separate mortality rate for the rabbits here. I guess we basically assume as rabbits get older, they might get a little bit slower, and therefore they're the ones a little more likely to be caught by the fox than the young adult healthy ones. So we have our growth rate for the rabbits, we have the death rate for the rabbits, we have the growth rate for the foxes, which is due to both their food source and of course just the reproduction rate, and then the death rate of the foxes. All right. So for this particular simulation, we're given some initial conditions of the population of rabbits and the population of foxes. All right, and you see, well, look, we got 0.8. Well, 0.8 here is like referencing like 0.8 thousand rabbits or something along those lines. So it's the population of rabbits in thousands. So that 0.8 indicates there's 800 rabbits. We don't actually have fractions of rabbits and foxes, obviously. All right, so this is, we got to pay attention to the units. So this is in thousands. All right, and then we have our terms, and I didn't actually record any units here for these coefficients, but we have all our coefficients for the various terms, mortality rates, and such. So what we're going to do here then is we're going to create an Mfile for this. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to edit a file. We'll just call this Lotka-Volterra.m. Alright, so I'm going to create an M file. And again, at the beginning of our M files, we should always just kind of have a comment in here. With our name and the date and then we should use comments in the code as you're going along just to kind of say this is what we're doing. So I'm going to clear out the system here. So I'm going to do clear, which is clears the variables. CLC clears the command line. I'm going to open up figure 1 and clear that in case it is already open. All right. And so the first time you execute it, of course, it doesn't really make all that much difference. But the next time you execute it, if you don't actually close the figure, then you definitely need to clear it. So I find it's easy just to get that over with. All right, so now we're going to initialize our variables that we know. So we have our A, so we have A and H actually are both 0.2 in this case. B and G are B is 0.6 and G is 0.25. H is 0.2. G is 0.25 and B was equal to 0.6. Just want to double check those. 2, 6, 25, and 2. All right, and I'm going to just put B up here just to make it in alphabetical order. Okay. A, B, G, and H. And then I'm going to have my rabbits. Population of the rabbits and population of the foxes. I'm going to go ahead and spell out the variables for rabbits and foxes, so it's a lot clearer what we're talking about. If you have too many letters, it can get very confusing very fast. So now we're going to create a time variable, and so I'm going to have my time step. And for this simulation, I'm going to make my time step 0.001 0.001 or 1 milli-month. So if you look at the, I didn't have it on that previous slide there, but if you look, the unit, the time unit for this is months. And so so this is actually going to be 1 milli-month. month, if you will. Okay, and so then we're going to create our time vector, time t 0 colon time step colon, and I'm just going to run it for 80 months at the moment to see where I'm at. Okay, I'm not quite sure where I'm going to end up at, so I'm just going to run that. So then we're going to we're going to evaluate the derivatives and integrate using our for loop. So we're going to say for k equal 2 colon the length of t, and I always just like to do the beginning and end here. Right away, so I get my for and end together as a set. And then indent inside your for loop, you should always indent. So now I'm going to have the change in rabbits is equal to a times rabbits k minus 1 minus b times rabbits k minus 1 times foxes k minus 1. So remember that we're going to be evaluating the change. So this is the change during the current time. So when we first start at time t equals 0, we know that we have this initial population. Okay, so given this initial population, we can evaluate how fast the population is changing. And so then we're going to evaluate the next time step at time k equal 2 is going to be our prediction. We're going to predict how many rabbits we have, how many foxes we have based on our current values. Now notice that this is d rabbits here is just a scalar value. So I'm not actually going to save this to plot it. I'm just using it to evaluate my change in the population of the rabbits and then the population of the foxes, which is equal to b times g times the population of rabbits times the population of the foxes at this current time minus this mortality rate of the foxes. Okay. All right, so there I have evaluated my derivatives. To find the rate of change. And then now I'm going to use Euler's method to calculate my next population of rabbits. So the rabbits at k is equal to the rabbits at k minus 1 plus the time step times the change in rabbits. Okay. And then the same for the foxes. All right, so now that we have that, then we can go ahead and plot this. So I'm going to select figure 1, which technically it's already selected from above, so I don't have to select it, but I'm just going to label it here as figure 1 so I can get back to this quickly and easily. And then I'm going to plot my time versus the number of rabbits, and we'll make them blue rabbits, and then the time versus the foxes, and we'll have some red foxes. And then of course I need to label. My X label is time, as I've already previously stated. The unit for that is months. And my Y label is the population. And the units for that is just thousands. Okay. Then of course we want our title. And let's just take a look at it and see how it goes. Now, one thing, I wrote pretty much the whole simulation here, but if you remember what I've said before, it would have been really good if I would have maybe stopped right here and executed about this much code and make sure I just didn't have a typo in it. And then create a for loop, maybe even part of the for loop using just the derivative pieces, and of course, but you do need that end. So if you remember, that's kind of part of the reason I like to put the for in the end there, and then I can throw a couple of lines in there, test those lines before going any further. All right, so given that, then I'm going to come over here to my octave, and I'm going to go ahead and run this. So I'm going to run this command, and you know, it took it a little while to run because I was my time step was kind of small. So this is then our graph that we have here. So you can see I've got the times in months, the position in thousands, I've got my title here, but I didn't put the legend. So I'm going to flip back over here and put my legend here. Okay, so the first thing we plotted were the rabbits. And the second was the foxes. Alright, so I'll pop back over here, execute this again, and then look at my graph. Go ahead and close that window. All right, so there we have my graph. And you can see the graph here, you can see the labels. And the one thing though is the lab states that there should actually be 3 cycles. So you can see here that the cycle starts with the blue going negative. Remember, the blue is the rabbits, so the population of the rabbits is actually declining. And then the population of the foxes is following that because there's less food, there's less rabbits around, there's less interaction between the foxes and the rabbits, so there's less food for the foxes, and so they're dropping. And then we hit a point where the population of the foxes has dropped enough that enough rabbits are surviving to breed faster, and so the population of the rabbits actually begins increasing very quickly. And so that you can see the population of the rabbit increases for quite a bit, but then the population of the foxes begins catching up to that. And so it as the population of the foxes begins to grow, that then of course starts bringing the population of the rabbits back under control. And so, but the lab instructions stated to have 3 full cycles. So you can see here we're going to have a dip and a max, a dip and a max, and then we start another dip, but we didn't quite get another max here. So looking at this, we got kind of like 1 full cycle looks to be somewhere around a little bit less than 40. So just to make the number nice, I'm going to extend my time up to 120. So I'm going to come back over here to my code, and I'm just going to go up to my T and just change the max of my T to 120 so that I can see, hopefully I'll be able to see then 3 full cycles. So I'm going to rerun this, come back to my command window, rerun this, and then go to my image, and now you can see that yes, there is 3 complete cycles there. So we have a dip, a maximum, dip, a maximum, a dip, a maximum, and then we have another dip there. But you know, so you could say maybe we could have cut it off at 110 and that would have been 3 complete cycles, but I just kind of rounded up. 120 is a slightly more round number there, so either one would be acceptable depending on how the lab is worded, but the lab in this case was just worded show 3 complete cycles, so we want to make sure that we capture a complete cycle. 3 complete cycles in there. All right, and so then that gives us our populations. So we have the population of rabbits and the population of foxes versus time. Okay, so just a standard time plot like we've been doing with a lot of the other labs and tasks that we did. But now what I want to do is something called a phase plane. So I want to create another figure. Now I'm not going to change any code up here. I'm simply going to create another figure. So I'm going to say give me another figure, and this is going to be the phase plane. If I can spell here, wow. Okay, so we're going to create a phase plane, and the phase plane can kind of vary some. Sometimes the phase is like the function versus the derivative of the function, or the derivative of the function versus the second derivative of the function, something like that is sometimes the phase plane. Could be the phase plane, but in this case the phase plane is more, I have just 2 different units here, rabbits and foxes. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to plot, instead of plotting versus time, I'm going to plot rabbits as the independent axis and foxes as the dependent. Okay. Okay. So this is the phase plane. Okay, so I might even go back up and reword my title for my time axis versus time or something. Time plot. So now my X label is going to be rabbits. Okay, again, the units of this is in thousands, and the Y label is foxes in thousands. Okay. Alright, so I'm just going to take that. I'll come back here. I'm going to re-execute the code one more time. Still executing here. Or no, I guess I didn't clear my figure. I already had this figure here before and I didn't clear it. So remember, always when you do figures, to clear it. So I'm just going to come up here, and anytime you call a figure, unless you want to just recall that figure, you need to clear that figure. Okay. So that you start with a fresh plot. So I'm going to rerun this. This is my command window here. I'm just rerunning the file. And there is my plot. Okay, so this is my plot of rabbits versus foxes. So as you can see, as the population of rabbits increases, the population of the foxes starts increasing. Now at this point, there's so many foxes here that the rabbit population begins decreasing, but there's still lots and lots and lots of rabbits. And so what happens is that the population of the fox is still growing. So the population of the fox is still growing until we get up here to this maximum point for foxes. And then both the population of the rabbits and the foxes begin decreasing. Now when we get over here, right here, somewhere along this point, we get to the point that the population of the foxes has decreased so much that the rabbits don't have so many foxes chasing them anymore, so more rabbits are getting away and creating new rabbits, so that the population of the rabbits starts increasing again. So we kind of have 4 quarters in here, although they're not evenly divided quarters here. But down here in the lower left, we have the area where the population of the foxes is decreasing, but yet the population of the rabbits is starting to increase. And then at this point, we down here around 1,500 rabbits, we have so many rabbits that the foxes are getting plenty to eat, and so their population is starting to grow. And so the population of the rabbits and the foxes are growing until we get over to about this point. Now there are so many foxes around that they are having quite a bit to eat, and therefore they're able to reproduce faster. And so we're having more growth of foxes. So the population of the foxes are increasing and increasing and increasing. And then but the population of the rabbits up in here, population of the rabbits is decreasing. And so we get to this maximum point here where the foxes start having trouble finding enough food. There's so many foxes and not enough rabbits for all the different foxes, and so the population of the fox also starts to decrease, and so on. So this here is what they sometimes refer to as a limit cycle. So it's just a continuous sort of feed here, and just goes around and round and round. The population grows, reaches a maximum, and then decreases. Now, of course, as we've talked about before with simulations often, when you do simulations, you always have to start by simplifying. So we have quite a few simplified assumptions in here. Number one is that the population of the rabbits is only being reduced by foxes. So we're ignoring any other external means, including, just mortality. I already kind of talked about that. But also, hawks and coyotes and other animals also like to capture rabbits. And and therefore would reduce the population of the rabbits. And so this simulation is ignoring any other external factors. So it's only assuming foxes and rabbits. Similarly, we're ignoring the fact that, hey, when the population of the rabbits grows so high, there may not be enough food to actually feed all of those rabbits. And so they may actually, their population may start slowing down or declining simply because there's not enough food. So there's another factor that we kind of left out. So, and of course, foxes don't always eat rabbits. They might find other food sources at times. So again, this is obviously a simplified model here, but you always want to start with a simple model, get it working, and then you can look at trying to add in other factors.